Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. My name is Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe. And I don't know if you can hear that, but my dog, who's quite sick lately, is choking over there. He'll be fine. But hope you're all doing well on this fancy Friday. If you are tuning in live here on Behance, let me know in the chat who you are and where you're tuning in from. We've got Umacorn and Chris and Biola, Frank and Steve, Masayu, Ted. I saw Paul in here who's going to be running the Photoshop Masterclass right after this, so stick around for that. Sam, General Kenobi, Stony, Clarissa, David, Louis, I probably mispronounced his name. I do apologize. You're going to hear honking and choking throughout this stream. I promise my dog's okay. He has a collapsed trachea, or a collapsing trachea, which causes him to choke like that. He'll be okay. All right, so day number 9 of the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. Head on over to behance.net/challenge/Photoshop. Get all the information about the challenge. You can definitely press that big blue button at the top. This round is coming to an end today. We're gonna have replays after this, but we will have another challenge coming up in just 2 weeks, which is amazing. Every single day during the challenges, you're going to receive a new challenge, Monday to Friday, except that first Monday. He's really going at it over there. You can join us in our community chat over on Discord. New audio device. No, I don't switch. So, submit your work in Discord. We have some amazing channels over here. We have a challenge channel. So if you're participating in our latest challenge, or the one that's live, you can pop your work in there. If you're participating in past challenges, you can also submit it over here. You can also get information about the challenges, share tips and tricks, talk about Photoshop, design, that sort of thing. It's a good time. Hope you're not losing your voice again. No, so I drank a lot of tea yesterday, drank a lot of water. I think I'm good. So my voice is back, but we'll see. By the end of today, I do have a masterclass later today, so we'll see how my voice is doing. But so far, so good. I don't have water, but I do have coffee, which doesn't help, right? I think my dog should probably drink more water than me. Anyways, we're gonna go ahead and get going. I've done the recaps yesterday and all the days, so we're gonna dive into things. So today, we are going to be tackling Parallax website preparation. Now, some of you might be asking, what the heck is a Parallax website? Let me show you. So if you go to Dribbble or Behance and you type in something like Parallax website, you'll get a ton of examples of what Parallax is. And essentially, you know, a lot of time, just a perfect example that many of you may understand. You're driving in a car, right? And you're looking out the window on the highway and I don't know if you can all hear the choking. Let me know in the chat if you can hear the choking of my dog. If not, I'll just ignore it. So you're on the highway driving, and everything in front of you, like directly the road and the barriers, they look like they're going by super, super, super fast. But then you look down a little bit, the trees are going a little bit slower, but still fast. And then far in the distance, the mountains look like they're hardly moving. And that's kind of the parallax effect. Items at different distances will move at different speeds, right? So things like this example here, some of the elements are moving a little bit slower than others, some are moving a little bit faster. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be preparing an image for a parallax treatment. All right, so definitely go ahead and hit that Get Started button, download the file. You can definitely, they can hear it. Okay, I promise you'll be okay. He chokes like this all the time, keeps us up all night sometimes. Poor guy, there's literally nothing we can do about that collapsed trachea, but it is what it is. He's 12, so he's lived a pretty good life. Yeah, if you want to watch the video later on, you can definitely do that. All right, let's hop to Photoshop, and here is the template for today. On the left, we have our prompt. So today's challenge is to prepare your images for a Parallax website using various techniques, and we went over a lot of these techniques throughout the last 2 weeks. A lot of selection methods, a lot of healing, that sort of thing. All right, Deanna says, my cat used to do that. Yeah, it's no fun. And it's hard to tell if they're in pain or not. He doesn't seem like he's in, it's just frustrating that he seems frustrated that he's choking a lot. All right, so what we're gonna do is essentially, if you take a look at this image here, we have a few different distances, right? We have the kind of hills and road in the foreground. We have the mountains, and then we have the sky in the background. And what we want to do is separate all of these elements so that we can move them at different speeds. We can add in maybe text layers or additional elements. And then if we have time, we can actually bring this into Adobe XD and prototype it quite quickly. All right, so what we're gonna do is we are gonna start pretty simple, and we're gonna select the sky. So this blue area at the top, we wanna isolate that from the mountains and everything else. So I'm gonna start with, let's try the quick selection tool. And that's found on the left-hand side in your tools bar. And the nice thing about the quick selection tool is all you have to do is it works very similar to a brush. So I enlarged my brush using the right square bracket key, and I'm simply going to paint along the sky. Now what you're gonna notice is because there are some areas that are very similar to the sky or has a little bit of that color in there, it didn't get everything, which is fine, because then you can just go in, you can just click, and if you want to subtract, you hold down your Alt or Option key and you click and it subtracts really nicely. So anything on the mountains will want to subtract. And you can also use something like the sky replacement tool to create a sky selection. But we're going to go ahead and use some various methods here. And then this area here, because it was so similar to the clouds, it selected that as well. But we can definitely brush in there just like this. And that should do. The selection doesn't have to be perfect because these will be layered. So anything that is not, perfectly selected or extracted, we'll be able to almost layer that out, right? So I'm just taking a quick look around here just to make sure I have most of the sky selected. I'm just deselecting some of the mountains, holding down Alt or Option, and that looks pretty good. Now at this point, we talked about masking, we talked about other different extraction methods. Masking is probably your best bet, but because we're going to be, doing a bunch of these edits and extracting a few elements, what we can do is just, hold down our Command or Control key and press J, and that'll essentially take the sky and create its own layer from it. So it'll cut it out, but it'll also keep the sky in the original image intact. Now, if you were to add in your Shift key, so Command Shift J, it'll still extract the sky, but it will cut it out from the background, right? So there's a few different ways you can go about doing that. I'm noticing one little area here that I might want to sharpen up. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, so there we go. Command or Control J. All right, perfect. Next up, we have our mountains. And we can use a similar a quick selection technique. We can potentially, let's try out our object selection tool. And if you remember that tool, all you have to do is draw out a marquee selection around the object you want selected. Now this may not work exactly the way we want it to, but it does a pretty good job. As you can tell, all I did was I dragged a selection around the mountains and it cut them out, which is great. And then I can go in with my quick selection tool if needed and just add to that selection so I get these mountains back in, right? And if you want to be super precise, and this definitely takes a little bit longer, but you can use something like the pen tool to really get into the nitty-gritty of these mountains. For something like this, it'll take a while, but if you do need that very precise selection, that could work. And I'm going down here because the road will be its own layer. I'm going to just make sure to deselect some of that. I'll probably keep all of this. That looks pretty good. Now, here's something we have to think about, right? Down here at the bottom, we have these trees that are kind of at the border of this selection. Now, if we were to simply Command or Control J to extract it, it doesn't look too bad, right? But we have a little bit of, that we might want a little bit of those, tree ruffles and leaves and things like that to be included. So that's an area where you can explore, select, and mask. And if I go ahead and experiment with the opacity, right down here, it's a little bit harsh. So we can turn on something like our smart radius and then increase the radius a little bit so that it just includes a little bit of those leaves and ruffles and things like that, especially if you're using, or if you're getting selections of hair. You can utilize smart radius and your radius slider as well. You can shift the edge a little bit. I'm going to probably stay away from shifting the edge only because I want as much of these selections as possible. But if we take a look, it's not bad. I might want to increase the contrast just a little bit and just experiment with the radius. I'm beach balling. Don't do it, Photoshop. Don't do it. It's always fun when you're live streaming, right? Oh, okay, there we go. We're good. Oh, no, we're not. Yes, we are. Maybe we are. I don't know what's happening. I'm gonna just press OK and see what happens. So I have my selection now. And just like I did before, I can do Command and Control J to extract it. And now I have my sky layer, right? And I have my mountains. And the last thing I need to do is select the foreground. And we could go ahead and create another selection like we did before, or what we can do is we can actually create selections of the mountains and the sky and then invert it. So inside of the layers panel, I'm going to hold down my command key and then click on the mountains to make that into a selection. And then I'm going to hold down command and shift, and you're going to notice that the decoration changed to let you know you're going to add to the selection, right? And of course, if you do command option, it's going to subtract. So command shift and click on the sky. And now essentially I have everything up top. There's a little bits and pieces up here that have not been selected. I can just go through and brush with my quick selection tool like that. So I have everything at the top selected and then nothing at the bottom selected, but I want the inverse of that. So if I go to select, I can go to inverse, and it's going to flip that selection. So now I have everything at the bottom, but nothing at the top. So if I do Command and Control J, I now have the foreground, right? So we have all three layers ready to go, and I can hide the background if I want to. But because this is going to be used on a website, I might want to prepare that for either a client or importing into another application. So if I grab my artboard tool, I can draw out an artboard over here. I'm going to make sure that this artboard is 1920 by 1080. And this will really help me set up for website design. Of course, you can go smaller, you can go larger, whatever it might be that you want. And what I might want to do now is start taking these layers and then moving them on over. Now, of course, I could keep it on this particular artboard here, but the aspect ratio is a little bit different. It's a little bit large. So just to help me prepare a little bit more, I'm just going to drag these onto this artboard. And then I'm going to transform, and I'm holding down my shift key to constrain it. Now I will note that depending on your settings, so if you hop into your Photoshop settings and your preferences, there is a setting in here that will allow you to turn off or on holding down shift to lock that aspect ratio. It is in tools, I believe, and use shift key for tools. No, not that one. Which one is it? Photoshop has so many preferences. It's in here somewhere, but it'll allow you to either constrict and lock that aspect ratio without shift or keep shift on. All right, so now we have all of our layers, and I'm gonna make sure that everything is layered properly. So the foreground, which is our road, I'm gonna put at the top. Then we have our mountains, and then we have our sky in the background. And I can move things around if I want to, like this, right? And you can kind of see a preview of what's eventually going to happen. Now, I also mentioned earlier that, let me just make sure that the mountains are in place really nicely in the sky. And then the foreground. Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, we may want to also add some elements into the background or the foreground, right? So if I grab something like my text tool and I type out the word travel, let me make this quite a bit larger. That's an interesting typeface. It's the Julia typeface. It's not bad. And now that we have everything layered, right now this text layer is at the top. So as I'm moving it around, it always remains up there. But if I push it back behind this road layer, all of a sudden I can kind of move it back there a little bit. So I can actually start it off behind the road here, right? And I can also position maybe the road a little bit up. Maybe I can move the mountains down a little bit. The sky. Now, something we have to talk about the sky is at this point we may want to actually maybe replace the sky, right? So that we have more back there. So let me actually hop over to Finder for a second. I'm gonna move this over just to make sure I don't reveal any goodies from Adobe Max. That would not be fun. But I do have some images of skies up here, so I might want to grab, I don't know, this one looks kind of fun. This one's not bad as well. So maybe I'll just copy this. I'll drag it directly into Photoshop. Make it larger. And now I have a new sky back there that I can use for that parallax effect. Again, it's not going to move too much because it's way in the background. And I'm noticing a little bit of the mountains in one of these. Yep, this one here. So I can simply turn a mask on, grab my brush, black brush, and paint it on out. There we go. So I can kind of just move some of these elements as to what they're going to look like in the essentially first state, right? And there we go. So we have our first view created, and now we want to simulate what it's going to look like after the parallax effect actually takes place. So if I grab the artboard right at the top, I can duplicate it by holding down Alt-Option and dragging it over. And now we can make some modifications to not only reveal that text layer that we hid, but also move the foreground around a little bit. So the foreground, because it's in the foreground, it's going to move a little bit faster, right? So I'm going to move this down quite a bit. I'll move the mountains up just a little bit because that is a touch further. And then the sky, I'll just move just a tiny bit, little bit, because it's much further in the distance. So it's really not going to move too much. But the important thing is that text layer. So if I grab that text layer and then move it on up, I can pop it right in place, just like that. So what we've done is we have gone through and made some extractions. So we've extracted the foreground, which was the road and these trees and the bushes on the side. And then we extracted the mountains and then the sky. And we even went as far as to replace the sky. And you can go even further than this and add additional elements. I would probably sharpen up this text a little bit to make it maybe more stylistic or change the typeface, something like that. You can also add things like navigation bars or, arrows. Let's do that before we bring it into Adobe XD. So maybe over here, I can grab, let's say, an ellipse. Whoops. Helps if I'm right on the right artboard. Grab an ellipse, do something like that. There might be an arrow at the bottom here. And maybe the fill, maybe there's no fill, but there is a stroke on the inside, right? Something like that. Then grab the line tool. And then we can go ahead and, where was it? Here we go. Hold on. Where's the, I lost it. Here we go. Arrowhead end. Let's make this a little bit, might have to push it on the, there we go. Okay, hold on. There's no arrow, that's fine. We'll pretend this is an arrow. The arrow's not working. I'm probably doing something wrong. I don't spend much time in Photoshop anymore, but we can pretend this is an arrow, right? And we'll want to make sure that this is on both artboards. So we'll copy this, we'll hop over to our first artboard, and we'll paste it. Or we can just drag it on over. And I'll move it down a little bit, and maybe I'll decrease the opacity to 0. Now, at this point, you can go ahead and pop open the timeline in Photoshop and start fiddling around with animation keyframes, all that fun stuff, right? Or we can make this very simple. We can actually bring this into Adobe XD. And if you have Photoshop, then you also have Adobe XD as part of your Creative Cloud subscription. All I'm going to do is save this file that we've been working on. So it's saving right now. And if I hop over to Finder, I do have right over here the file that we were just working on. So both artboards are there, along with all the layers and all that fun stuff. And I can open this directly in Adobe XD. So I'm going to drag it to my dock, pop it open in Adobe XD. So it is a Photoshop file. I don't have to do anything special with it. I simply need to drag it onto Adobe XD or File, Open, and then find that Photoshop document. And then here it is. It looks exactly like it did in Adobe XD. So if I zoom in here, you're going to notice we have all of our layers. We have I didn't name them very well, but we have our foreground, we have our mountains right back here, and then we have our sky at the top, which I cannot select. There we go. There it is, right? And the same thing on both artboards. And everything is layered just like it was before. So the big question is, how do we actually bring this to life so that the parallax effect happens? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to select the first artboard. And then up at the top, we can go to prototype mode. And if you're brand new to Adobe XD, never used it before, I'm going to be hosting a masterclass in just about a few hours, 12 o'clock Pacific time, right here on Behance. And maybe I'll go over this again or some other web design techniques. But I have the first artboard selected. And then over to the right, there's this handle that you can drag to your destination. And we want to drag it to that second artboard. And I do see a question about XD. I'll take a look at that in just a second. And then for this one, we might want it to kick off at a certain time, right? So we want a bit of a time delay, and that's going to be the trigger. And we'll give it a slight delay of like 0.4 seconds maybe. And then the key here is to select Auto Animate under Type. And essentially, if you're new to XD, what this is going to do is it's going to instruct Adobe XD to look at the first artboard and the second artboard. So both artboards that are wired up. It's going to look at the differences between the layers that are common between those two artboards, and it's going to automatically animate those changes. So let's try something like ease in and out. So it's a little bit slower at the beginning, a little bit slower at the end. So it ramps up, then ramps down, and we'll give a duration of, let's try like 4 seconds. It might be a bit slow, but we'll see what that looks like. And all we have to do now, I also forgot to heal out some of that stuff over there, but that's fine. All we have to do now is press that play button at the top and watch the magic happen. Right? Again, I forgot to heal out some additional areas up here at the top, but looks pretty good. And all we had to do was just wire up those two artboards. And let me drop this to maybe 2 seconds, see what that looks like. Not bad. And then we can start adding in additional elements. Maybe, there might be a navigation bar. So I'm going to very quickly draw out. I'm not going to put all the icons or anything, but I might want to do something like this, and then maybe add a background blur just to get a bit fancy. Maybe I'll add a little bit of a border, drop the opacity. And then we can actually start this behind the mountains. So right back here, we can start it behind the mountains, drop it all the way down there. I'm going to copy it to my clipboard, make sure it's on this layer as well, and then move it on up. Whoops, wrong layer. And if we play one more time, now that navigation bar is also included. And if you added some logos or text or whatever it might be, all that will appear as well. So Mayor was asking, I have an XD related question. I am creating DLS, and I was wondering if I can publish an artboard within an artboard using the share option. Artboard within an artboard. So you can't combine two artboards, but you can publish multiple artboards or multiple flows simply by in share mode or in prototype mode. Turning this option on so you can create a home screen. So this could be, parallax. And then you can have additional artboards down at the bottom. And then you can assign additional home screens. Or if you, just wire all the home screen or all the artboards up, you can include them all in your prototype. Or if none are wired up, then they'll all be included. So there are a few different options, but you can't have an artboard in an artboard, if that makes sense. Anyways, that is going to wrap things up today. I'm going to go make sure my dog is okay. Hope you all enjoyed this. Can't wait to see what you all produce. Definitely throw it in Discord or on Behance. Paul Tranny is coming up in just a few minutes with a Photoshop masterclass, and I'm going to be back in a few hours with an XD masterclass. So thanks again, everyone, and I'll see you all next time.